have that constraint. So,
All right,
all
sounds
right,
good.
begin.
The topic Nicholas and I have agreed upon is institutional racism is prevalent in the United States. As I am the one affirming this claim, the burden of proof lies with me to demonstrate the truth of that claim. For Nicholas to win this debate, he has to demonstrate that either A, the evidence I present is invalid, or B, the evidence I present does not sufficiently prove my claim. Anything else said by Nicholas is off topic. He can say that quote-unquote black culture is the real problem all he wants, but that doesn't make it true, and it doesn't make it relevant to today's debate. Therefore, it is the fact that institutional racism exists, not the effects of that fact, that we will be debating today. And I do mean it when I call it a fact. A study from the Journal of Criminology and Public Policy indicates that unarmed black men are twice as likely to be shot by the police than unarmed white men. Furthermore, a study from the Justice Policy Institute in 2007 concludes that in 2002, black Americans were incarcerated for drug offenses at 10 times the rate of white Americans, and that 97% of large population counties have racial biases in their drug offense incarceration. Furthermore, a study from the scientific peer-reviewed journal Nature Human Behavior, analyzing 100 million traffic stops conducted across America, found that the bar for searching black and Hispanic drivers' cars is significantly lower than the bar for white drivers, and that, additionally, black drivers are less likely to be pulled over after sunset when a veil of darkness masks one's race, demonstrating a clear racial bias in police stops. Statistics from the Bureau of Justice corroborate that when black police initiated an interaction, they were twice as likely to threaten or use force against black and Hispanic residents than white residents. Furthermore, a 2012 study from the United States Sentencing Commission finds that black male offenders receive 19.1% longer federal sentences than similarly situated white male offenders. These studies on their own are enough to conclude institutional racism is prevalent in the United States. I've got dozens more studies demonstrating this fact, and I'll bring them up when I can throughout the debate. Nicholas, your burden is to disprove these studies entirely. The sociological consensus is against you.
So first, I do believe you're confusing individual and institutional racism. Even if black men are stopped disproportionately and as a direct result of race, disregarding driving patterns, seatbelt usage, etc., I'd like you to explain to me why, rather than pinning the blame on differences in driving, you immediately imply the entire disparity is due to race. But first, let me do my intro. My name is Nick Cow. I politically identify as right-leaning libertarian. My position is as follows. Institutional racism is no longer prevalent in the United States, and I also believe that institutionalized racism isn't an inhibiting factor regarding people of color, and I'm negating the proposition that there are structures of racism that regularly affect BIPOC and our country. So, I don't believe I need 2 minutes for that for our intro, so let's begin. So first, I believe we've reached a consensus on that culture is a major part of crime and poverty disparities, correct?
I will agree that culture is at least in part responsible for some disparities in crime and poverty.
So your quote here verbatim is that, all right, well, I do agree that culture is definitely one of the major causes. Let me ask you this question. Why is their culture that way? To which I responded, I don't know about the upbringing of black culture enough to speak on why their culture is inherently the way it is. So let me ask, if you can say that culture is a major part of both crime and poverty statistics, why is it not present in economic mobility?
Culture is present in economic mobility. I don't understand what that question is supposed to say. Once again, I literally called this in my opening, that he can say that quote-unquote black culture is the real problem all he wants, but that doesn't make it true, and it doesn't make it relevant to today's debate. Remember, Nick, we're not debating whether or not institutional racism is the cause of the disparities in crime and economic outcome. We're debating whether or not it's prevalent, because before we can even debate the extent to which institutional racism causes these disparities in culture, we have to debate the validity that institutional racism exists. You're already going off topic.
So answer the question that I posed in my intro. That rather than pinning the blame on differences in driving, you immediately imply the entire disparity is due to race.
Yeah, that's what the Justice Policy Institute finds in 2007. Or that's what the Nature Human Behavior journal it finds. It analyzed 100 million traffic stops. And the reason we can conclude it's from race is because the bar for searching black and Hispanic drivers' cars is significantly lower than the bar for white drivers.
Then why? Okay, so here I have in a study conducted via the New York Times, 2.7% of black drivers and over 38,700 were accused of speeding, compared to 1.4% of white drivers. And you'd think that that would be evidence of racial bias inherent in police, right?
No.
Except, why? Why
Nick,
so?
engage with the study. It says that the bar for searching black and Hispanic drivers' cars is significantly lower than the bar for white drivers. I'm not
Okay, but
referring to
previously,
traffic stops. You can say that black people don't wear seat belts all you want, but that doesn't change the fact that once the car is already pulled over, regardless of the disparities and why the car was pulled over, the bar for searching that car of a white person is significantly higher than the bar for searching a black or Hispanic
I'd like
driver's
you to
car.
clarify what you mean by the bar.
As in the likelihood that an
Firstly.
officer will search. I'll send you the link to that study, and you're welcome to engage with that as you want.
Yeah, I will look over it later. So we originally were debating about I believe speeding and traffic stops. Can you tell me why it's a result of racial bias of and not of other factors
Yeah,
or
I
other
absolutely
variables?
can, because the study
Okay.
finds that black drivers are less likely to be pulled over after sunset when a veil of darkness masks one's race. So even if you're right that, apparently black people wear their seatbelts less, first of all, I would say that's just one minor thing that couldn't explain this giant disparity in traffic stops. And second of all, if that's the case, then why does the disparity in traffic stops disappear at night when you can't tell the race of the driver?
So would you agree that there is inherent racial bias in policemen pulling over minority groups?
That's what the study finds, yes.
So once again, let me tell you these statistics. 2.7% of black drivers and over 38,000 were accused of speeding, compared to 1.4% of white drivers. You'd think that would be evidence of racial bias inherent in police, except the study was conducted using specially designed radar cameras and not policemen. Yet black drivers still sped approximately twice as much. So explain that.
Nick, black drivers are less likely to be pulled over after sunset, so the
But
disparity.
they are two times likely, more likely to speed, regardless of police bias or
Okay,
anything.
so Nick, hold on. If they're 2 times more likely to speed, then wouldn't they be pulled over just as much during sunset as during the day?
I mean, you can say, I'm sorry. Can you tell me the statistic again,
The
or like where you
Nature
got this
Human
from?
Behavior scientific peer-reviewed journal analyzed
Yeah.
100 million traffic stops, and they found a disparity between stops and searches of black and Hispanic cars versus white cars. And at sunset, the disparity went away because the officers couldn't tell the race of the driver. So even if you're
So
right,
like,
if black
what
people
are
are
the
just speeding more, so they're getting pulled over more, then
yeah?
why would that disparity go away at night when they can't see the race of the
So
driver?
what are the percentages? Because you keep saying there's a disparity. I'm not seeing like the actual statistic.
I don't have statistics memorized. This is the study from the Nature of Human Behavior. If you want, we can go over the
Alright.
entire study and waste the entire debate on that. It's
I
a
see. Well,
statistically significant conclusion.
statistically significant, but you can't tell me the actual statistics.
Sure, just give me a second to read over the study.
All right, take your time, please.
I just read conclusions of studies, you just cite random statistics. That's the difference between us. Let's see. To date, we have collected and released data on approximately 221 million stops carried out by 33 state patrol agencies. So that was the poll sample, so obviously quite sufficient enough to examine the entire United States. Let's see. In particular, among state patrol stops, the annual per capita stop rate for black drivers was 0.10 compared to 0.07 for white drivers.
So a factor of 0.03, you say?
0.
Would that be sufficient
0.10 for
enough to
black
determine
drivers.
inherent racial bias?
Yes, sociological studies use a factor called statistical significance, where they calculate the probability of this happening due to chance. And the study concludes that there is a statistically significant disparity in pullovers for blacks versus whites.
even accounting for the differences in driving patterns um of minority groups and seatbelt usage and all of that I've already iterated with you one time and
Yes,
time
this is a sociological study that uses multivariate regression analysis, meaning they control for all factors, which is why they found that after sunset, the disparity goes away because the police officers can't tell the race of the driver. If it
I
was
will
really about
definitely.
speeding, why does the disparity go away after sunset?
But then why? Okay, but why do they speed twice as much?
That I don't care. I don't care if they speed twice as much, Nick. I care whether or not they're being disproportionately pulled over. The study finds a statistically significant disparity
And
in
would
them
you
being
not
pulled over
attribute any
versus
of that
whites.
to
If that
the?
disparity goes away after sunset, when the police officers can't see the race of the driver, that means that the race of the driver is the cause of the disparity during the
Once again, you
daytime.
haven't listed any statistical evidence that the percentage changes from day to night. You only
That's what
listed
the
the
study
percentage from
concludes, my
white
dude.
drivers to black drivers. It concluded that, but you haven't provided any statistical evidence.
Okay, let me find the exact other statistic from the study. Let's see.
And I feel like we're lingering. A third of our time's already,
I do feel like you are lingering
So,
and rejecting the
you
conclusions of a peer-reviewed sociological journal. So if you'd like to move on to my next
because
study,
you're
go
not
ahead.
providing any. All right. Well, I'd like to put the debate on the topic of sentencing since you
Fantastic.
um
Yes,
all right.
please.
So I mean, well, you provide your argument,
Okay.
and
The
I will.
United States Sentencing Commission finds that black male offenders receive 19.1% longer federal sentences than white people who committed the same crime with the same past offenses with the same socioeconomic background.
Okay, so I'd hope you bring this up. So, firstly, clearly, each case is unique, with each defendant having his or own distinctive set of facts, circumstances, and history for a sentencing judge to consider. So, here are just a few of the numerous mitigating or 23 aggravating factors, none of which include the defendant's skin color or race, that judges consider when imposing a sentence. Number one, defendant's prior convictions. Number
Controlled
two,
for in the
degree of
study.
violence employed. Number three, sophistication which the charged offense was committed. Number four, I
Controlled
could
for
go
in the
on and
study.
on. But
Controlled for in
all
the
right,
study.
show me. What do you mean?
I linked the document that I am citing and reading from to you in the Discord chat. The United States Sentencing Commission used multivariate regression analysis, meaning they control for all other variables, and found that black male offenders receive 19.1% longer federal sentences than similarly situated white male offenders, meaning white male offenders with similar past offenses, similar socioeconomic background, etc.
Tell me.
I
Okay, so are you
linked it.
aware of Peters versus Sturgis?
No, I'm not. Tell me.
Okay, so it's one of the infamous case comparisons often used as a sort of basis for the argument of systemic racism. So they are a white and a black man, respectively. You follow?
Okay.
Both were charged for robbery whilst armed with a dangerous weapon. Sturgis was given 2 years of probation and 4 years in federal prison. Peters was given probation for 6 years. But here's where the lines begin to blur. You can take any two individuals accused of the same crime of differing ethnic groups and claim racism when one is given a disparate sentence, but you fail to acknowledge the mounds of variables altering the outcome. So,
No,
for one,
first of all, you're citing an anecdote
I
against
also
the
want to
study.
know.
And second of all, the study controls for all other variables. It's called multivariate regression analysis.
So, explain to me how you control for variables like racial bias when it is not an
They
act
can't
like.
control for variables like racial bias, which is the
Exactly.
conclusion of the study, that racial bias exists in the justice system. Thank you. That's my point. They controlled for all other variables besides racial bias, therefore concluding that racial bias was the result of the 19.1% disparity in whites and blacks in the exact same condition. So you can point at like one individual anecdote, but that doesn't
And I'm
prove your
list
point.
you could list over and over again all of the cases like where a white and a black man have been given disparate sentences. I could probably look through all the variables, but even if you were to find a completely unique case where both the offenders were exactly the same except for race, and you were to prove that they are actually they were racially discriminated against, that wouldn't
Yes,
like.
that's what the study
Okay,
proves.
so first let me continue. Okay. So for one, Jaquavis fled and shed his clothing. Keep in mind, in select states, police evasion would
Anecdotes.
be anecdotes. Yeah, I mean, but you could continue to give me more and more, like.
Yeah, I
Okay,
know.
so
I can continue to give you more and more studies, and
I
you'll just
could
say,
be
"Oh,
like
well, nope, they're all wrong because I don't like
because there are
academia."
too many variables. There are too many variables for you to conclude beyond a reasonable doubt that racial
Nick,
bias. Okay, so for
are you
one,
a
Jaquavis fled and
sociologist?
shed his clothing. Keep in mind, in select states, police evasion would be an additional charge, be it a felony or misdemeanor. Demeanor. I'm sorry. Despite the minimum sentence for armed robbery being 10 years, he was actually given what was actually described as the lowest permissible prison sentence for such crime via ledger. And second, Alan Peters had a learning disability and was examined to have a second grade reading and writing capability at the
I,
time of his
I,
arrest,
I
which
don't
media outlets
care
like Herald
about your
Tribune,
anecdotes.
etc., omit from their articles. Go figure. This actually perfectly aligns with one of the 23 mitigating factors, number 7, which states the defendant requires specialized treatment for a mental disorder that is unrelated to substance abuse or addiction. So explain that.
Nicholas, I don't have to explain one little anecdote. The study finds, and I quote from the conclusion of the study, after controlling for a wide variety of sentencing factors, the commission found that black male offenders continued to receive longer sentences than similarly situated white male offenders.
And such variables include.
Do you want me to go over the methodology of a 102-page study? Do you want to do that, Nick?
I mean, if you can't provide any statistic evidence.
I did. I said a 19.1% longer federal sentence between black male offenders and similarly situated white offenders. This is what all conservatives do. We present them a statistically significant disparity in which controls for all other variables using multivariate regression analysis, a tool used by actual sociologists.
And you fail to provide statistics regarding the disparity, and you also
19.1% disparity. I don't. What do you mean fails to provide statistics? That's the statistic.
For one, the day and night disparity between.
Okay, we're going back to that study now.
If you'd like to, yeah.
Why? Because you're losing on this one? Wait. So have we reached a consensus on sentencing, or?
No, there's no racial bias in sentencing. I will continue.
Why?
So,
why do you think that sociology as a whole is? Do you just not believe in academia?
Every defining incident of two identical cases being disparate in judge sentencing, I could go through every.
So let me get this right. Okay.
Variability, or you could accept that no two cases are completely alike, and you can't form a conclusion that systemic racism runs rampant in crime sentencing when there are countless irregularities in doing so.
I can't form a conclusion. You're right. The United States Sentencing Commission, using sociological multivariate regression analysis, can make that conclusion. You're not smarter than sociology, Nicholas. I hate to break it to you. They control for similarly situated factors. So are you?
None of which you provide. Hold on. None of which you provide, though.
Wait.
So let me.
Hold on. Let me get this right. Are you saying if no two cases are alike, right?
I'm not disproving the sociologic what's it called?
Wait, if you're not disproving it, then I win.
No, I'm not disproving this select case. What I'm saying is, with that being said, okay, so let me continue my argument. Is that fine with you?
Go ahead.
So with that being said, I do recognize that the majority of the judges in the United States are Caucasian, 73% to be exact. Do you follow? But to attribute the majority of myriad cases to institutionalized racism is ludicrous. Further, if you were to find a case where the defendant's cases are exactly alike and were to prove the effects of racial bias in said case, it wouldn't be remotely categorized as systemic, but rather individual. Institutionalized implies customariness, practice, or overt commonality. To which don't. To which I'd like you to outline the customary practice and commonality of racial prejudice within the judicial system. Go ahead.
Great. So individuals make up institutions, Nicholas. And if you're saying that no two cases are alike, so say there's a black person and a white person who have very similar circumstances, and the black person gets greater sentencing. That's what you were pointing at your anecdote, but then you said, oh, well, actually, the reason he got this greater sentencing is because of this variable. Okay. Well, that means that in another situation where a black male and a white male receive the exact same crime and similar socioeconomic background and similar past offenses, shouldn't the white person in that case also receive a longer sentence? Because maybe in that case scenario, there's differences. If no two cases are similar, then you would think that it would sort of balance each other out, right? But instead, what we find from multivariate regression analysis that controls for all of the variables you're talking about is that 19.1% longer federal sentences from similarly situated white male offenders and black male offenders, which proves that the institution of the justice system, which is made up of implicit bias, or individuals that have implicit bias, such as judges, is having this massive disparity.
But you said institutions are made up of individuals. But does that mean that the institutions themselves, practice customariness, practice or overt commonality with racial bias, and not
if
just
black people are getting 19.1% longer federal sentences than whites in the exact same circumstance, then I would say that the institution is racist.
All you want, but you fail to recognize the variables in doing so.
No, I don't. It's multivariate regression analysis. It controls for the variables. Okay, we're going in circles. If you just want to reject sociology, let's move to the next study you can reject.
All right, then continue. So what do you want to go?
So
convictions, exonerations, what?
So here's an interesting study. This one was done by the National Bureau for Economic Research, and they found that job applications that were identical to white job applications, if they had a black-sounding name, they were 50% less likely to get a callback.
To get a callback
on the job application, right? So if a job application,
I believe there was a
go ahead.
I believe there was a study going. I think for the names like black sounding surnames like I believe Jefferson and something else. But
okay, I've heard this one, Mr. Shapiro. Okay,
yeah.
So guess what? Jefferson and Washington aren't black-sounding surnames. What a stupid study, dude. Like, do you think a white employer... Hold on. Are you seriously telling me an employer is going to look at a job application from, like, Paul Washington and think, oh, yep, that's a black person? No, Washington and Jefferson are not uniquely black-sounding surnames. That study doesn't disprove the findings of the first study at all.
That's completely opinion. I'm going to pull up a study regarding I think the surnames of Jefferson and Washington being very prominent within African American surnames actually. So
hold on. Just because you can prove that they're prominent among African American surnames doesn't prove that most employers think they're common. So that data doesn't disprove my point.
That's completely opinionated. You can't just say...
Right, it is opinionated. So if you have an opinion and I have an opinion, then it's a wash. So you have to provide me data finding that employers believe, in a majority, that the surnames of Washington and Jefferson are black-sounding surnames.
Well, you have to provide me what? But then you have to prove that Jefferson and Washington are not black-sounding surnames.
No, I don't, because you're the one making the claim that the surnames disprove my claim. I bring you the... Okay, forget about the surname.
I will bring you the evidence that that Jefferson and Washington are very prominent within African-American surnames. Once again...
Are they prominently viewed by employers as African-American surnames?
No, I'd like to see you disprove so.
That's not how burden of proof works, Nick.
I don't care what your debate.
I know you don't care about studies. I know. Okay, so why would a black-sounding first name even get 50% less likely?
Surname.
No. The study I'm referencing is a first name.
First name, yeah.
Why would a black-sounding first name be 50% less likely to get a callback on a job application?
What do you mean by callback? Can you clarify?
As in, the employer calls the job application for an interview. As in, we accept your application and would like to conduct an interview.
I'd like you to link your study.
I did. It's in Discord.
You know you haven't. Oh, the doc that you've been using?
Everything I'm reading from the doc. Scroll down to the very last link under job applications.
It says access denied, but I will look into that when possible. So yeah, continue.
I mean, I think I posed you the question. Why would a black-sounding first name be less likely to get a callback?
I said I will look into that.
Oh,
Did I
okay.
not?
Great. Thank you for looking into it. So, I believe we only got 5 minutes
Okay,
left,
I'll
so
get
by this
back to
point...
you already. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, my.
If you'd like to extend the debate, I'd be more than happy.
How about we reschedule like another time, or I'll get back to you on text.
Sounds great to me.
I feel like okay.
So,
So
just to summarize where we are so far, you disagreed with my study finding that black people and Hispanic drivers are significantly more likely to be pulled over than white drivers.
proving so.
And
you
that
also
disparity
failed to
goes
highlight the
hold on. That disparity
between
goes
black and
away at
brown
nighttime
drivers.
when they hold on. That disparity goes away at nighttime when the police officers can't see the race of the driver. What was your response to that again?
I'm sorry?
What, because the police officers can't see the race of the driver at nighttime, so the disparity in searches and stops goes away. What was your response to that again?
That the disparity between day and night and
Yeah.
minority drivers.
Mhm.
I said I requested statistical evidence. You failed to do so.
I provided you this stuff. Okay, so
You
want me to give you
provided
the
me
exact
this.
number?
You did
All right.
tell me. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Bam. Control F, sunset. Let's see. The overall proportion of stops involving black drivers before and after dark went down by 95%. So the disparity decreased almost entirely at sunset.
Okay, so I'll look into that also and get back to you. So it actually looks like our time is nearly up. So I believe we've reached some great talking points today. I'm very glad to have been here to discuss. I'll leave it to you to conclude.
You don't want to do any that was your conclusion?
What?
That are you going to have was that your conclusion or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Great. So, this was a pretty interesting debate today. Showed me a lot about Nicholas. So, he denied, or actually just totally ignored the study I cited about drug offenses at 10 times the rate of white Americans and that 97% of large population counties have racial biases in their drug offense incarceration. Hopefully we can get back to that another time. In response to a study from Nature Human Behavior analyzing 100 million traffic stops, which found a statistically significant disparity in stops and searches of black and Hispanic drivers, he said that that entire disparity can be accounted for because black people don't wear their seatbelts. Then he said that the disparity doesn't go away after sunset, and then I showed him that it does by 95%, and he said, great, I'll look into it. I'm doing my conclusion right now, Nicholas. Then I cited statistics from the Bureau of Justice that use multivariate regression analysis that controlled for literally every single variable controllable, that found that a 19.1% longer federal sentence in similarly situated white male offenders than black offenders. I'm doing my conclusion right now, Nicholas. Than black offenders. To which he responded, well, there has to be some variable they aren't controlling for, right? Which doesn't entirely make sense, because if no two cases are different and there are variables that can cause disparities, then you would expect... I'm doing my conclusion right now, Nicholas. Then you would
malleable, which you are...
Then you would... Okay. I'm doing my conclusion right now, Nicholas. Then you would expect that the disparity would sort of balance each other out. But no, because Nicholas just doesn't believe in multivariate regression analysis. He believes that his big brain can find some sort of imaginary variables that the geniuses over at the United States Sentencing Commission didn't account for. So at the end of the day, it seems to me as though Nicholas is just purely stuck to the conviction that institutional racism doesn't exist and willing to reject all sociological consensus otherwise, which makes me think that perhaps Nicholas on some level does acknowledge that institutional racism does exist in the United States, he just doesn't care. Either that or he just doesn't like academia very much. So on that note, hopefully we can talk again. I'd love to see what he has to say about these studies, and it's been great, Nicholas.
It's been great.
Goodbye. Well, that was an interesting one. Yeah, I didn't hear any statistics from Nick either, Gambit drawing. Maybe my ears are pretty bad. So that was an interesting debate. Thank you for watching, everyone. You can see that it's just the rejection of all sociology is the only way to really negate the fact that institutional racism exists. And what conservatives love to do is they love to pivot onto the much more complicated topic that institutional racism, the extent to which it's the cause for the disparities in economic and crime outcomes. And yeah, I agree with you, Scooter, that half an hour is not enough time to cover it. I initially proposed 2 hours with Nicholas, but he wanted half an hour. Probably he didn't want to get destroyed for more than half an hour, I'm guessing. I don't know. I would love to see a day 2. That will really depend on Nicholas. But at this point, a day 2 would probably just be me citing more studies with multivariate regression analysis and him saying, well, what about that variable? So that's interesting. Thank you for watching, everybody. And